she gets to brag that the president interrupted her.
Yes, indeed. And then after Mark Lowe, Linda Brickman. Or maybe Linda Brickman now and Mark Lowe's no longer here. Okay, Mr. Lowe appears to have left the building. So, Ms. Brickman. I'm sorry, Mrs. Brickman. Please give your name and let us know what you know.
All right. My name is Linda Brickman.
You're going to need to get really close to the mic because people have been saying that they can't hear us.
Okay. My name is Linda Brickman, and I want to thank you, all of you, legislators, chairman, and Mr. Mayor, for letting me come forward and be able to speak today. Effective November 12th, 2020, as the first vice chair of Maricopa County Republican Committee, the MCRC, by operation of law upon the resignation of the chairman, I took over the performance of the chairman's duties. I was notified by Ray Valenzuela, Director of Elections, that the logic and accuracy LNA certification of the Dominion voting systems would take place on November 23rd. With limited notice, I was later notified the date was moved to November 18th, 2020 at 10 a.m. There will be about 11 issues that I need to share with you today. For a little background, I arrived at Maricopa County Tabulations and Election Center, MECTEC, prior to 10 o'clock a.m. for what was supposed to be the morning turnaround inspection of the Dominion software and equipment. However, it took some 8 hours before the two formal LNA certifications were completed with mixed results. We began in the BCC, or tabulation room, where the Dominion software and machines were set up ready for actual testing. There were about 8 or 9 regular versus high-speed machines set to tabulate all the numbers from the test ballots. As part of the SOS, or Secretary of State's Elections Office, the LNA certification, and one mainframe computer plugged into the wall, and a computer technician's workstation with a desktop computer to transfer results from the individual tabulators and into the server. This mainframe machine that I observed was to calculate all the test ballots and add up the zeros to give a grand total of all 8 or 9 machines that totaled the ballot count, supposedly equaling 0. The problems that occurred almost from the start with the SOS certification. For example, a number of the ballots could not be read by the tabulator machines. At least one or more of the tabulators broke down and portions had to be replaced. Incorrect information had been inputted into each tabulator earlier that morning, and the wrong files were loaded up into the mainframe by the computer technician, and neither the SOS Secretary of State staff nor the computer technician were able to quickly resolve the problems. Instead, we were all alerted that it might take an hour or more to work things out. So we all adjourned at 2 o'clock to take lunch. At approximately 2 p.m., I asked if the problems were resolved and what had happened. Instead, I was informed that the machines were not calculating correctly, and all the machines had to be shut down during a break, during the lunch break, and reset, and they were going to start on a brand new test. About an hour plus later, the ballots were run into the tabulators, and printouts of the results in the form of a cashier's tape were received by me and others. Then the memory sticks from each tabulator were removed and handed to the computer technician for loading into the server, along with other relevant files, as we were told. Printouts were then generated by the Dominion server, and county chairs from the 3 county political parties, as well as other observers, began comparing the individual voting totals tabulated for accuracy. Once completed, the county chairs were asked to fill out and sign the certification for the SOS LNA. As per Ray Valenzuela, the director of elections, and other observers, they were asked to sign if they insisted, but only as an observer capacity and not in an official capacity. Then it came time for us to sign the certification. Based on the issues described above with the SOS LNA test and my familiarity with reports from other state Secretary of States, for example, Texas, and other information that I had and that I turned over to the BOS, which is the Board of Supervisors, I went ahead and signed and denied certification, writing on the form, quote, certification denied, Linda Brickman, MC, Maricopa County Chairman, unquote. We then began the second LNA test, but this one was conducted by Maricopa County election staff and on separate Dominion voting tabulation machines. This was a similar process with results going to the server, and reports were then again printed out. But for whatever problems or irregularities that surfaced during the first SOS test, they did not manifest this time. And then for the same reasons noted above, I denied certification, writing on the Maricopa County form, quote, certification denied, Linda Brickman, MC, Maricopa County Chairman, unquote. I also have copies of all the ballots counted with copies available upon request later. Again, my reasons, as noted, were above my first-hand observations of the flaws and irregularities in the SOS LNA tabulating and calculating of the Dominion software, the unexplained turning off of the computer system and doing a reset versus a correction, and the over 5 hours for the SOS test and results review, plus my lack of faith in the second LNA test. We could see the machines, but we could not see or observe the software behind the machine to confirm what had really gone on. As a veteran county elections worker who actually worked the election both during the August primary and the general from 10/19/20 to 11/11/20, working on signature verification room, duplication room, adjudication room, ABC room, and the hand count audit, let me share at least 6 irregularities that I personally observed. Number 1, signature verification standards were constantly being lowered by supervisors in order to move more quickly and process the higher amount of early and mail-in ballots from approximately 15 points of similarities, where you see a rounded L or a straight line, a number of different similarities that we were told there may be an hour process of training prior to all this beginning. From the 15 points of similarities, reduced to a minimum of 3, lowered to 1, and ultimately none. Just pass each signature verification through, we were told. Too many rejections have already been turned in and reviewed. We need to move more quickly. This is not the way an election should be run. Where's the integrity? 2, alleged signatures and challenged signatures on envelopes where the signature was completely different from the person and the name as a listed voter. These were let through and approved by supervisors. So the ones who signed the envelopes were not the actual voter, but these were allowed to go through with Maricopa County verified, stamped on the outside of each affidavit envelope. 3, challenged runs or batches of envelopes for signatures, verification observed by me to be the exact same handwriting on the affidavit envelopes. And these were on various ballots. I saved what was the ballot number, and I believe I've turned it in. If not, I do have that information, where there were at least 30 ballots that I saw at one time that were all signed by the same handwriting, but on different voters' names. When I asked the county attorney if the county attorney would be alerted for possible fraud, I was told no, but supervisors would take care of it. In the dupes room, number 4, and this is the duplication room, I observed with my Democratic partner the preparation of a new ballot since the original one was soiled or wouldn't go through the tabulators. I read her a Trump Republican ballot, and as soon as she entered it into the system, the ballot defaulted on the screen to a Biden Democratic ballot. We reported this to the supervisors, and others in the room commented that they had witnessed the same manipulation. We were never told what, if any, corrective action was taken. All I know is the next day I was called outside the room that I was working in signature verification by the supervisor saying, I understand you caused some problems this week, and saying that you thought our machines were not working correctly. And I was being the one that was scolded. And I was told at that point in time I could not discuss anything or talk about what was going on, as many people were threatened because they were told that their voices would be suppressed. They would be either have to leave the room and not work there again. I'm here because I think this is our duty to speak the truth and hear the truth. Number 5, election office observers. When it became apparent that more and more early and mail-in ballots need to be processed, I mentioned that the current role of the number of observers per party was not adequate. 1 per party unless all parties agreed to more. And since the governor refused to call the legislature into session for whatever his reasons, and little incentive for the Democrats to agree to a higher adequate number, there was no way that 1 observer per party who were forced to the back of the room or to have to watch behind a closed-in wall or a see-through wall would have legitimate opportunity to see what election workers were actually seeing in real time and doing, especially where up to 20 or more workers processing tests, sometimes in 10 seconds or less. And I personally observed most observers acting clueless and did not believe any of them even recognized the challenges that I was referencing above. Number 6, one of the most egregious. In both the duplication and adjudication rooms, which I worked, I observed the problem of Trump votes with voters checking the bubble for a vote for Trump, but also writing in the name Donald Trump under the write-in candidate and checking the bubble next to his handwritten name again as a duplicated vote. And this would continue on as an overvote, which means no vote was counted at all, despite the policy having been changed to allow these overvotes. Supervisors contradicted their own policies where the intent was clear. Ray Valenzuela, Director of Elections, told me openly the morning of the Dominion certification, November 18th, 2020, that this was incorrect. The supervisors were terribly mistaken, and as an adjudicator, I was instructed incorrectly that these many votes should have been counted and not turned away as an overvote. Chairman Fincham, legislators, mayor, I am here today, again, not as an expert in the Dominion software, but I'm here as a voter in Maricopa County who wants to hear and speak the truth even though myself and many others have been suppressed to speak before you now. There should be integrity in our voting and our voting electorate. Voting is not a right. Voting is not a privilege. Voting is not an option. Voting is an obligation for every legal American citizen. God bless America, and God bless Donald Trump.
Thank you, Ms. Brickman. Just one point of clarification. You mentioned Ray Valenzuela.
Yes, sir.
Is this the same Ray Valenzuela that stood before the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors and told them that no dead people voted?
I'm sorry
That no dead people voted?
I cannot answer to that, sir. I don't know.
All right. Actually, we need to have another witness for that I don't believe is here. Mr. Giuliani, do you have any questions for Mrs. Brickman?
Mrs. Brickman, I would like to ask you this as the head of the party in Maricopa. And I imagine you've been involved in Republican politics for a while?
Close to 30-some, 40 years.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for your dedication to the party. This is really in the nature of advice. Why? Let me ask it this way. I have this feeling that if I were representing a Democrat president, and this was a Democrat governor and Democrat legislature, and I called up with a third of these allegations, we would have had a special session. They would have canceled out the vote, and they would have designated the electors for Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton, or some other scoundrel like that, without much fuss. Now, I understand we're not them, and I don't want us to be them. That's why I'm a Republican. We're not crooks. They're crooks. But we also don't have to be suckers. We don't have to allow them to intimidate us, allow them to con us, allow them to make fools out of us, allow them to shove down our throat a vote that we know is false. Explain to me how your governor certified that vote today.
Fortunately, I can't be
What's
in
wrong
those
with him?
You want me to say on the
What's
mic
wrong with him?
what I think what's wrong with him?
Yeah, what's wrong with him?
I
don't know. I have an open mind. I've got an open mind to what's wrong with him. No neutral observer could possibly have signed that. Certainly not a Republican. I mean, he has 200 of his citizens testifying that it's a fraud. The number of votes that they cheated on, I just keep counting them, and that's why I asked. We're well over 100,000. We have acts of fraud that are astounding in America in this day and age. And he hired a voting machine company that's a disgrace. Someone should figure out, what kind of competence you have in your state government that you hire a voting machine company that specializes in fraud and uses Venezuelan and Chinese parts and sends our vote out of the country. And I'd like to know from the governor, did he know that?
I think he did.
Did he know that our vote was being sent out of the country? Exactly why was our vote being sent out of the country? And if he didn't know it, you got a real serious problem. And if he did know it, he has an even more serious problem. But tell me what's wrong with him. Why can't he just give us an honest, he wouldn't even meet with me. He doesn't want to hear these. It's like, don't show me the facts. Please. Don't show me the 30 or 40 or 50 of my citizens who swear under oath that this happened. So can you give me any explanation I can bring back to the president?
I think he was, in my personal opinion, I think he was bought and paid for, along with... along with,
I didn't expect that answer.
I think that was a rhetorical question. I'll
Not-
it is
not-
a rhetorical question.
Representative
But I-
Biasucci.
You're
But I
entitled to
also
your
believe
opinion,
that-
and I will take it into consideration. I did used to do that for a living.
But I also believe that Steve, or excuse me, Mr. Sucre, thank you. He knew about all these problems with the Dominion system because
He knew about the problems with Dominion and Smartmatic and...
Oh, absolutely, because I personally sent him a lot of information before he decided to go
So
ahead
I assumed, maybe wanted to give them the benefit of the doubt, that maybe they didn't do a good job of vetting the company, because I can't imagine a governor presented, first of all, presented with the notion that any foreign company is going to count our vote. Even an ally is abhorrent. We should count our own vote in the United States.
Thank
Right?
you very much.
Mr. Chair, to that.
Now you give me a company that's not just Canadian, but sends the ballots to Germany with a connection with a Venezuelan company. All he has to do is go back and read my congresswoman's letter of 2006, in which she says it's not possible to discern the true owners of Smartmatic. The owners are hidden. Smartmatic has been associated with the Venezuelan government led by Hugo Chavez, which is openly hostile to the United States. She concludes, Smartmatic and Bitzer provided the voting machines for 3 frauds. Smartmatic worked with a company called Sequoia. They were thrown out of Chicago. And guess who bought Sequoia? Dominion. All you have to do is you don't have to get Morgan Stanley or Kroll to do this investigation. You just take out your iPad, put in Smartmatic and Dominion, and with a little reading, you get all this. Although some of it now has been, sanitized. But
What a
we
surprise.
kept it. So you're telling me your governor... See, I just assumed it was a matter of laziness or incompetence, and they never got it. You're telling me he knew this?
Yes, he
Wow. Okay. Mhm. Wow. Okay.
Please.
Thank you.
Mr. Biasucci.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Linda, thank you for being here, and I appreciate all you've done, for the party. And something you said that really bothered me to even hear this is even a possibility. But you mentioned that in the duplication room, you saw Trump ballots counting as Biden ballots, Biden votes, right?
Yes.
Trump votes were being counted as Biden votes. Now, I just want to be clear here. I mean, you gave an affidavit, right? This is under oath. This is the truth. You witnessed that happening
Yes, sir.
in
More
the
than
room.
once.
More than once. And the explanation from the supervisor was what?
All right. I am not going to listen to this. If you have to be removed from the building, you will be. You're interrupting testimony and questioning. End it. End it.
Hold on, guys.
Mr. Biasucci.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Brickman, if you could just repeat that for one more time, and what was the reaction from the supervisor when you asked him that question?
Mr. Chairman, legislators, we reported this ballot default in the screen as a Biden Democratic ballot. We reported this to the supervisors and others in the room, commented that they had witnessed the same manipulation at other times. We were never told what, if any, corrective action was taken. Nothing that I know of had ever been corrected. And as I believe I mentioned right after that, I was yelled at, reprimanded the next day by my own supervisor for causing trouble and bringing up things that I shouldn't have been bringing up.
Thank you. Thank you for clarifying.
Senator Allen, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Linda, it's so good to see you again, and Thank you for hanging in there and doing the work that you're doing. I would like to bring up what the Maricopa County supervisors said in their letter when they certified the Maricopa County vote. They said the Dominion tabulation equipment was vetted by a bipartisan equipment advisory committee before the contract was finalized. The committee tested the functionality and accuracy of the tabulation equipment before it was used in any Arizona election. The Dominion tabulation equipment met mandatory requirements during the accuracy test before the presidential primary and general election, and after each of these 2020 elections, the hand count audit shows the machines generated an accurate count. And so it's interesting to hear as you talk about being there as they're testing the machines and all the breakdowns and the problems that went on. Were the supervisors not made aware of the problems that came up when you were doing the audit?
I find it difficult, Mr. Chairman, legislators. I find it difficult that they weren't aware of it, because I was aware of it. I'm just a nobody. I'm another voter. And if I was aware of it and I could pass it on to the supervisors, as well as the governor's staff, as well as other people in power in the Arizona Republican Party, I find it difficult that they did not know. Why is it, and let me ask a question if I may, how do we know that the same systems were being used and that the machine wasn't changed and that there weren't problems? We know during the election itself that many of the machines, I believe in almost all locations, were shut down at the exact same time, because while I was working at the elections department, the machines were shut down.
Well, Mr. Chairman, if I may, thank you for that. I'd like to follow up on the duplication. How many duplication did you get to see? Because the previous person that gave testimony, I asked this question about my concerns over the duplication thing. Who is there being sure that it's entered into the machine properly and correctly and it's observed? So can you tell me more about that process? How's that done, the duplication process?
Okay. This was only for the general election now, because I worked it also during the primary, so I'm only speaking about it for the general. A machine is put before you, about, I would say this high, this wide. And the actual ballot, the person's ballot, your ballot, sir, could be on the left-hand side. A blank ballot is then placed on the screen, the same screen, and we are to duplicate the votes from the person's ballot over to the right with the intent, and that's the magic word, the intent of the voter. Most of the things that go through the duplication room, not the adjudication room, are because they're soiled or they're damaged. They could be ripped. There could be a number of reasons why it wouldn't go through the tabulation machine. So we had to duplicate it to a clean ballot. My Democratic partner, whom I worked with for quite a while, I worked in there for a good 4 days, probably 8 to 10 hours a day. So we did this on a number of ballots. So you asked me how many ballots. We could get through a ballot in about 15 seconds. So figured out over a 10-hour day, over 3 days, that's how many ballots we could see. When we had a chance to go ahead and start moving all the names from the original ballot over to the sample ballot, some of those ballots were already completed. They were pre-filled out with names. So we had to go ahead and erase all the names on the right-hand side. Could have been Democrat, could have been Republican, could have been independent. We didn't look. We just had to erase all those existing names that were already inputted on those ballots on the duplicated one. We started moving the names over, and we would check each other as a Democrat and Republican to make sure that we were correcting each other. No supervisors, no observers were behind us at all times. The observers, which were very few and far between in that room, never came back to where we were. We were behind the adjudication room. So it was difficult at best to see anything. There was a full wall there. Nobody could see through it. unless you're Superman. We started moving all the names from the actual ballot over to the regular ballot. Again, we had to even move all the ballots if they were 2 for Trump, one that was handwritten, one that wasn't. So it wouldn't be counted at all because we were told it was an overvote. We had to follow the exact same ballot. When we were ready to push pass through at the very bottom, it was just vote okay. We could see that all of a sudden the ballot was being reverted back to either a Democratic Biden ballot, or, and this didn't happen every time, but more often than not, it was going back to a Democratic ballot, or it would just revert back to whatever names had been on that ballot when we started. So we could never judge whether that ballot was actual, and we didn't have any recourse. We couldn't go back. Once it's in the system, it's in the system.
Once it's in the system, in other words, you couldn't correct it because once you push the button and it's in the system, and you can't go and say, wait, Dave, that's not what I entered.
No, not once it's already through, no. The only other time that we would have an option to be able to see that ballot is at the very end of the day when we would, at each team would get a whole list of how many ballots they had looked at. We would, if there were any problems with it, we would check on that mimeograph form to see if it was correct or not correct, or if a certain judge was put in or not put in, if, whatever that voter intended. If it still seemed to be a problem where my partner and I didn't agree with the way it came across, we could go to our supervisor, who gentleman's name was Bruce, either Bruce or John. We would go to one of them and ask them, would you please check the machine or check your records to see if these were correct? And we had a number of times that we had to go back in, and they said, yeah, this is the vote that was put in. And it was sometimes correct and sometimes not.
Thank you.
But we couldn't change it at that point.
Mr. Chair.
Mrs. Brickman, I have a question for you, and it's been alleged, and I don't know if I know that you have had something to do with the whole machine certification and all that. It's been alleged that there were certain machines that were swapped out on the day of the election that were actually not certified. Can you confirm that or dispute that?
I cannot say anything to that. I don't know, sir.
All right. Thank you very much. Mr. Giuliani, do you have any more questions?
Sure. Just a few, because I'm struck by the fact that we're kind of ending where we began.
We still have
Colonel Colson, Phil here testified at the very beginning about Dominion, and now Ms. Brickman is telling us pretty much the same things. I didn't realize that you know quite a bit about Dominion.
I'm learning very quickly.
And is it correct that it has an association with Smartmatic?
Yes.
And Smartmatic is a Venezuelan
Yes.
company that was started by Chavez in 2003, 2004 for the purpose of fixing elections.
Yes, sir.
And then Smartmatic worked with a company called Sequoia. I'm trying to simplify this. And Sequoia did an election in Chicago that was, even by Chicago standards, so bad that they fired Sequoia and Smartmatic. Can you imagine how bad it was for Chicago to fire them? And then there was a congressional hearing that's in the congressional record, from which I read you Carolyn Maloney's letter. All you have to do is read her letter, and it tells you that the company has Venezuelan origins and was invented for the purpose of fixing elections. And then, because you couldn't use the name Sequoia or Smartmatic anymore, Dominion acquired Sequoia, which had all the Smartmatic software and had all the Smartmatic sneaky games and algorithms in it, which also involved Chinese technology. And they started using it under the name Dominion, but would never disclose the history. But you would think that any prudent governor, secretary of state, or commissioner of elections would do the kind of research that you do when you give out a multi-million-dollar contract. I mean, I ran a city, and when I gave out multi-million-dollar contracts, the company was scrubbed very, very carefully. And if this had ever happened to me when I was the mayor, everybody who did it would be fired immediately and investigated. I wouldn't want my city having its votes counted by a Canadian company, much less a company involved with Venezuela. So you are corroborating the facts that our expert witness gave at the very beginning of the hearing, and I really appreciate very, very much your contribution. And also because Dominion has created this problem all over our country. It's not just here in Arizona. You shouldn't feel alone. Our country was victimized by these people in a very, very horrid and disgusting way. And thank you.
Representative Townsend.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Linda. I have a couple quick questions for you. First one is, do you think what we're doing here today is useful or a waste of time?
Mr. Chairman, legislators, I think it's very definitely something that we needed to be done. We need to go ahead and take this to you as the legislators, whether we have the governor behind us or not. He's never been behind us and never will be. This is something that you, in your right minds as American citizens, as voters in Arizona, need to do for us. And I thank you.
Thank you for saying that. And I believe that, yeah, go ahead. I believe that this is not in vain. Some have called it a dog and pony show. I think that it's showing the public what we're dealing with, and I hope it shows our leaders that we need to look into this further. Are you familiar with the DEF CON conferences that the Maricopa County Recorder has sent staff and himself to on taxpayer money? Are you aware of that?
No, I'm not. I'm sorry.
Well, let me read you the results of the 2 years ago. It says, this is the third year we've hosted the Voting Village, and this year we were able to give attendees access to over 100 machines, all of which are currently certified for use in at least one U.S. jurisdiction. The units tested included direct recording electronic voting machines, electronic poll books, ballot marking devices, optical scanners, and hybrid systems. The hackers at DEF CON once again compromised every single machine over the 2.5-day event, many of them with trivial attacks that require no sophistication or special knowledge on the part of the attacker. And I'm going to go ahead further on in the comments. In too many cases, physical ports remain unprotected, passwords remain unset or left in default configurations, and security features of the underlying commercial hardware are left unused or disabled. In addition to showing the security weakness found in the wide variety of election tech on display, the Voting Village's team report shares, and this is important, its strong recommendations for improving election security, most notably the urgent need for paper ballots and rigorous post-election audits. So what we've done here today, I think, is established that we need a rigorous post-election audit. They also go on to recommend that people get the attention of their elected representatives. That's what you guys have done here today. I appreciate that. And so thank you, Adrian Fontes, for bringing this to our attention, that we do need to have rigorous post-election audits and that these machines are not secure. I also want to mention briefly that in Texas, 3 generations ago, that the county supervisors had talked about that these election machines, they rejected it. And we haven't done anything this time to make sure that that rejection was corrected. How do you feel about that?
I think they should all be rejected in every one of the 6 swing states. Obviously, Arizona, how it's happened, I'll say it again. I think it was bought and paid for by a few people at the top, and that's why it was not taken care of. But this needs to be done in every single state, not just the 6 swing states.
Thank you, Mr. Brickman.
I have 2 quick questions that are not very long at all.
Okay, are these something that's already been covered, or?
It's the clarification on the write-in ballot. And then I have a question for Mr. Mayor Giuliani that he made a comment during his statement.
All right, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it has to be clear. I'm confused a little bit. You covered it, Mr. Chairman. So when these ballots were there, if there was a ballot, because here's the problem. Republicans won the state of Arizona except for the two big offices. All the supervisors were voted in. Fontes lost. I mean, Republicans, the legislature maintained control. So that all happened. But what you mentioned was that if a check mark was for President Trump and then a write-in candidate, even if it said Trump, that ballot wasn't counted?
That's correct.
Okay, that's what I think needs to be clear. Thank you very much. And Mr. Chairman, Mayor, did I hear you correctly that says, and you haven't said it at all today, did you ask to meet with our governor, Doug Ducey, and he declined to meet with you?
Yes, sir. I texted him yesterday, the day before yesterday. I explained to him I was coming here. I explained why, and he never responded.
He did not even respond, sir?
I explained to him I'm the president's lawyer, and I'd like to have the courtesy of meeting with you.
Mr. Chairman, Mayor, you were mayor of one of, if not the largest city on the East Coast as a Republican, and which has more people in that city than this state. And I think out of common courtesy and being on the same team, I apologize on behalf of whoever if they dropped the ball not responding to you.
I mean, I've been doing this kind of investigation for 50 years, and when people don't want to meet with me to hear the facts,
right,
I can kind of figure out why they're doing it.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for being here, sir.
All right. We have our last witness, Mr. Mark Lowe. Are you in the building, or have you gone home? Senator Gowan. Hold on, Ms. Brickman. Not done yet, I guess. Mr. Gowan.
Hello, Linda. Are we there? Hello, Linda.
Hello.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just one question. That's it. I want. Sounds like you're verifying what the Colonel spoke about earlier. When I saw in your first issue here, where signatures were for verification and the standards, you were saying at first they were high, and then they continued to get lower and lower standards, and then finally there were no standards. And I heard a couple others who were earlier saying there was like chicken scratch, but they were just saying, let's get through that?
That's correct, because we were told by our supervisors in the room that too many rejections of ballots had been thrown back because of not being able to verify the signature, that it didn't match the original ballot or the original signature when the person registered to vote. So they said speed it up.
So they directly told you that? So there in your opinion, there are ballots out there that were counted as a vote that the signature was not verified on an early ballot.
Or there was no signature at all on the outside of the ballot. It was just a scribble, or some people signed with a heart. It was not a valid signature.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, we're done? All right. Thank you very much, Mrs. Brickman.
Thank you.